They told you creatine was just for guys chasing bigger arms and a better mirror reflection. That it was a gym bro supplement, useful for bulk phases and not much else. But they left out the part that actually matters. Creatine doesn't just change how you look. It changes how your entire body functions from the inside out. And if you're taking 5 grams every single day, not skipping, not second-guessing, just consistent, your body is already shifting in ways you probably haven't even connected to that daily scoop. While you're focused on the workout, creatine is doing quiet work in the background, upgrading systems you never associated with a supplement, shielding your brain, accelerating your recovery, reinforcing your skeleton, supporting the muscle that never stops beating. These aren't marketing claims. They're the results of decades of peer-reviewed research on one of the most studied compounds in sports science. And most people taking creatine have no idea any of it is happening. Here's what makes it even more interesting. The benefits don't arrive all at once. They build, day after day, like compound interest on your body's performance, resilience, and long-term health. All you have to do is show up with that daily scoop and let the process play out. But to stay consistent, you need to understand what's actually changing under the hood. Because this goes way beyond the pump. If this is already hitting close to home, hit that subscribe button. Because what's coming next might just change the way you think about this supplement forever. Change 1. Your brain gets a quiet but powerful upgrade. When most people think about brain supplements, they picture stacks of expensive nootropics, complicated formulas, and overpriced drinks promising mental clarity in 30 minutes. But the most underrated cognitive enhancer available isn't new, isn't exotic, and isn't expensive. It's been sitting in plain sight in that same scoop you've been dropping into your shaker. Your brain is the most energy-hungry organ in your body. It's constantly firing, processing information, making decisions, filtering distractions, managing emotions, solving problems. Every single one of those functions runs on ATP, the cellular fuel that powers every biological process. And creatine plays a direct role in regenerating that fuel. When you supplement consistently, you increase the phosphocreatine reserves inside your neurons, which means more energy available during the exact moments when demand is highest. When you're under stress, when you haven't slept well, when you're pushing through mental fatigue in the afternoon and everything in you wants to check out. Those are the moments when creatine's effect on the brain becomes most tangible. People who supplement consistently report improvements in focus, processing speed, and memory recall within weeks. Not months, weeks. And this effect is especially pronounced in people who eat little or no red meat, since dietary creatine intake is naturally lower, and the brain's response to supplementation is amplified when it's been running at a deficit. But the cognitive benefit goes deeper than performance. Creatine acts as a buffer against oxidative stress inside neural tissue, helping prevent the kind of cellular damage linked to accelerated aging, cognitive decline, and conditions like Alzheimer's. You're not just thinking more clearly today, you're making an investment in a sharper, more resilient brain for the years ahead. While everyone else is asking whether creatine will improve their bench press, you're out here making better decisions, reacting faster, and staying mentally locked in when it counts. Your brain doesn't need hype, it needs fuel. And creatine delivers it at the cellular level every single day. Change 2. The kidney fear gets completely dismantled. Let's address the rumor that has followed creatine for decades and still won't die. You've heard it whispered in gyms, repeated in group chats, warned about by people who mean well but haven't read the research. Isn't creatine hard on the kidneys? Doesn't it cause long-term damage? Should you be worried? Here's the actual science. If your kidneys are healthy, creatine is not only safe, it's one of the most thoroughly researched and consistently vindicated supplements on the market. The confusion comes from a single data point that gets misread every time. Creatine breaks down into creatinine in the body. And yes, creatinine can show up as slightly elevated in standard blood work. But elevated creatinine in someone supplementing creatine doesn't indicate damage. It indicates your body is processing more of the compound because you're giving it more. It's the equivalent of checking the fuel gauge on a car and panicking because it reads full. That's not a problem. That's the system working exactly as designed. Multiple long-term studies, and we're talking years of consistent daily use, have shown no negative impact on kidney function markers in healthy individuals. Athletes, recreational lifters, and older adults who supplement creatine daily show stable GFR, stable serum creatinine within normal context, and no markers of progressive renal stress. The science isn't ambiguous here. It's clear. Creatine doesn't harm healthy kidneys. What harms people is quitting a beneficial compound based on a fear they never investigated. Now, if you already have diagnosed kidney disease or compromised renal function, that's a different conversation and one you should have with your doctor. But for the average healthy person, creatine is safer than the painkillers most people reach for without a second thought. The real cost of the kidney myth isn't just missing out on muscle gains. It's walking away from everything else creatine does. Sharper cognition, better recovery, stronger bones, cardiovascular support, because of a number on a lab report that nobody explained properly. Stay hydrated, which you should be doing regardless, and your kidneys will do what they were designed to do. Process, flush, and keep moving. Change 3. Your recovery gets rebuilt from the inside out. Most people treat recovery like a passive process. You finish the session, you eat some protein, you sleep, and you hope your body puts itself back together before the next workout. What you don't see is the complexity happening inside your muscle cells during those hours, and how creatine is quietly changing the efficiency of that entire process. Recovery isn't just about rest. It's a cascade of biological events that depends heavily on what's happening at the cellular level. And one of the most critical factors is cellular hydration. When your cells are properly hydrated, they heal faster, absorb nutrients more efficiently, and signal growth more aggressively. Creatine draws water into your muscle fibers. Not subcutaneous water, not the kind that makes you look puffy, but intracellular water that goes directly inside the muscle and triggers what's known as cell volumization. That internal pressure acts like a biological signal. It tells your body that there's volume here worth maintaining and worth building on. Protein synthesis accelerates. Repair mechanisms activate. The environment inside the cell becomes the ideal condition for hypertrophy and recovery to happen simultaneously. But the water isn't working alone. That shift in cellular volume also changes the pressure gradients inside the fiber, which accelerates the delivery of glucose, amino acids, and electrolytes, exactly the substrates your muscles need to rebuild. At the same time, metabolic byproducts like lactic acid and ammonia get flushed out faster. The result is a shorter soreness window, less accumulated fatigue between sessions, and more momentum to get back in the gym without dragging yourself through the next workout. Here's what makes creatine different from other recovery tools. It doesn't just speed up the bounce back. It builds resilience over time. Your muscles gradually become more resistant to damage in the first place. They handle volume better, tolerate intensity better, and adapt faster, which means you can train harder and smarter without constantly hitting the wall. All of this is happening under the surface, quietly, session after session, without any dramatic signal. No immediate high, no flashy result. Just consistent reinforcement of your body's capacity to repair, rebuild, and come back stronger. That's the rhythm creatine helps you maintain when everyone else is stalling or burning out. Change. 4. The strength decline. You thought was inevitable slows down. There's a point most people hit, usually somewhere in their 30s or 40s, where something shifts. Movements that used to feel natural start feeling heavier. Recovery that used to take a day starts taking 3. Strength that came easily starts requiring more effort for the same output. Most people write this off as aging, an inevitable decline you learn to accept and work around. But what's actually happening has a name: sarcopenia, and it's the progressive, biological loss of muscle mass and function that affects every adult who doesn't actively fight it. The key word there is actively, because sarcopenia isn't something that just happens to you. It's something that happens when your body doesn't have the stimulus and the fuel it needs to maintain what it's built. And creatine is one of the most powerful tools we have to push back against that process. The evidence here isn't subtle. Clinical studies on older adults who supplemented creatine alongside resistance training showed muscle and strength gains that were 3 times greater than those who trained without it. 3 times. That's not a minor statistical difference. That's a completely different physical trajectory. Creatine supports mitochondrial efficiency, meaning your cells produce more usable energy from the same input, which directly affects how strong, how mobile, and how active you stay as the years accumulate. It preserves fast-twitch muscle fibers that are typically the first casualties of aging. It maintains the kind of functional strength that translates to real life, carrying weight without strain, moving quickly when you need to, getting up off the floor without assistance. These aren't gym metrics, they're quality-of-life metrics. And creatine keeps that engine running at a higher level when most people are letting it gradually rust. The difference between aging with strength and aging with decline is real, and it starts with decisions made long before the decline is visible. 1 scoop, 5 grams, every single day, and your trajectory starts bending in a different direction. Change 5. Your muscles send a growth signal you didn't know you were triggering. When most people hear that creatine causes muscles to hold more water, the immediate reaction is concern. Water retention sounds like bloat, softness, puffiness, exactly the opposite of what most people train for. But the type of water creatine draws into your muscles has nothing to do with any of that. This water is intracellular. It goes inside the muscle fiber, not under your skin. And the difference between those 2 locations is the difference between an aesthetic concern and a biological advantage. The process is called cell volumization. When a muscle cell's volume increases, it creates internal pressure that the cell interprets as a growth signal. The body's response is to ramp up protein synthesis, accelerate the repair of damaged fibers, and create the optimal internal conditions for hypertrophy to continue. It's the same principle that drives adaptation in other biological systems. A stimulus creates a response, and the response is growth. The extra volume doesn't just trigger synthesis, it also accelerates nutrient transport. Amino acids, glucose, and electrolytes move into the cell faster, exactly when they're most needed after training. Waste products move out faster. The entire recovery cycle speeds up and becomes more efficient. Over time, people who stop taking creatine often describe a feeling of flatness, not just visually, but in terms of how their body feels and performs between sessions. That's because the cell volumization effect is gone, and with it, the accelerated recovery and enhanced growth, signaling that had been operating quietly in the background. So the next time someone dismisses creatine gains as just water weight, the correct response is, "You're right. And that water is exactly why my body has been recovering smarter, building faster, and adapting more efficiently than yours." The water isn't a side effect. It's the mechanism. Change 6. Your bones. Get stronger in a way nobody talks about. Muscles dominate the conversation around creatine. They're the visible result, the measurable outcome, the thing people post about and track in photos. But underneath every muscle that grows stronger is a skeletal structure that either supports that strength or eventually limits it. And creatine is quietly working on that foundation too, in a way that most people completely overlook until the consequences of ignoring it become very real. Bones aren't static. They're living tissue undergoing constant remodeling, simultaneously being broken down and rebuilt in a process that responds directly to the mechanical stress placed on them. When you lift heavier, move with more force, and train with greater intensity, your bones receive signals to grow denser and more resilient. Creatine contributes to this indirectly by enabling you to train harder and recover faster, which means the mechanical stimulus reaching your skeleton is consistently greater. But research suggests the effect isn't only indirect. Creatine may also directly influence the activity of osteoblasts, the cells responsible for building new bone tissue, particularly when combined with resistance training. The clinical evidence here is striking. In studies involving postmenopausal women, one of the highest risk groups for osteoporosis, creatine supplementation combined with strength training produced significantly greater gains in bone density than training alone. That's not a marginal improvement. In a population where bone loss is a serious and progressive health risk, the difference is clinically meaningful. Your bones are either getting stronger or getting weaker every single day. There is no neutral state. Without adequate stimulus and proper fuel, they slowly begin to lose density, invisibly, without pain, until one day the consequences become impossible to ignore. Creatine helps you build that foundation before the decline begins, turning your skeleton from a passive structure into an actively reinforced one that holds your strength with confidence for the long term. Change 7. Your heart gets a backup generator. It didn't have before. Your heart is a muscle, not metaphorically, literally. And it's the one muscle in your body that never stops working. No recovery days, no deload weeks, no rest between sets. Every minute of your entire life, it's contracting and relaxing, pumping blood, delivering oxygen, keeping every other system running. Which raises an obvious question. If creatine supports muscle energy production, what exactly is it doing for the muscle that never stops? Your heart requires a continuous and substantial supply of ATP to function. Under normal conditions, the cardiac muscle has sufficient energy reserves. But under stress, intense exercise, cardiovascular demand, periods of low oxygen availability, those reserves get taxed quickly. Creatine helps maintain a higher baseline of phosphocreatine inside cardiac muscle cells, functioning like a backup energy reserve that becomes available precisely when demand spikes. Whether you're sprinting, lifting at high intensity, or just climbing stairs with your heart rate elevated, creatine is in the background, helping the cardiac muscle sustain its output more efficiently and consistently. But the cardiovascular benefit extends beyond energy reserves. Creatine has been shown to reduce circulating levels of homocysteine, a compound that, when elevated, damages blood vessel walls, promotes clot formation, and significantly increases cardiovascular disease risk. Lower homocysteine means a more protected vascular system, and emerging research points to creatine supporting vascular function more broadly, helping arteries regulate their expansion and contraction more effectively, which supports blood pressure stability and the smooth delivery of oxygen, hormones, and nutrients throughout the body. This isn't a claim that creatine cures heart disease or replaces smart nutrition and medical care. It doesn't. But as part of an active, well-managed lifestyle, it functions as a quiet layer of cardiovascular support that most people taking it for gym performance have no idea they're getting. The same 5 grams you take for recovery and strength might be quietly helping you protect the engine that runs everything else. While the world debates pump and water weight, you're out here reinforcing the one muscle that never gets a day off. 7 changes, most of them invisible, none of them loud, but all of them real, all of them backed by research, and all of them compounding quietly in the background. Every single day, you don't skip that scoop. Your brain running sharper, your kidneys unaffected by the myths that scared everyone else away, your recovery accelerating from the inside, your strength and muscle mass holding ground against a decline most people just accept, your cells sending growth signals you didn't know you were triggering, your skeleton getting denser and more resilient underneath everything else you're building, and your heart running with a backup energy reserve that supports it when demand is highest. 5 grams every day. No skipping. That's the entire formula. Creatine is simple, but it only delivers when you're consistent enough to let the process complete itself. Most people quit before the deeper changes kick in. They chase fast results, fall for outdated myths, miss a few doses, and wonder why they're not seeing what the research promises. The gap between those people and the ones who actually experience these changes isn't talent or genetics. It's just consistency. Show up with that daily scoop. Stay hydrated. Keep training. And let your body do what it's designed to do when you give it what it needs. Which of these 7 changes surprised you most? Drop it in the comments. I read every one. If this video gave you at least one shift in how you think about creatine, hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.